In the year 1347, Europe did not go to war. It did not collapse from rebellion. It did not fall to an empire. Instead, it began to die. Ships drifted into harbor, carrying sailors who were already dead. Cities filled with the sound of church bells ringing without end. Entire families vanished within days. And within just a few years, tens of millions were gone. The pandemic known as the Black Death would become one of the deadliest disasters in human history, killing perhaps 30 to 60% of Europe's population. Some estimates suggest around 50 million people died during the outbreak. But the true horror was not just how many died, it was how quickly the world unraveled. What kind of disease could erase half a continent, and why was no one able to stop it? In the early 14th century, Europe was alive. Markets overflowed, trade routes stretched across continents, cities grew larger every decade. No one knew they were living in the final years of normal life. Then, somewhere far to the east, something ancient awakened. The disease responsible was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the same organism that still causes plague today. It likely originated in China and Inner Asia, long before reaching Europe. For centuries, the bacteria had traveled silently among rodents, waiting. But how did a distant pathogen cross continents and arrive without warning? October 1347. 12 merchant ships sailed into the Sicilian port of Messina. What waited on board was beyond comprehension. Most sailors were already dead. Those still alive were covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus. Citizens rushed to the docks. Within days, many of them were dying too. The plague had arrived. Historians believe it spread through fleas carried by rats, often transported aboard trading ships. Trade, the very force that built medieval prosperity, became the highway of death. Within months, the disease moved from port to port: Italy, France, Spain, then north, then everywhere. Between 1347 and 1351, the pandemic ravaged Europe on a scale never seen before. But what made this disease so terrifying was not just that it spread, it was what it did to the human body. Victims often appeared healthy in the morning and were dead by nightfall. The infection triggered high fevers and painful swellings known as buboes. Without treatment, plague can kill 30 to 90% of those infected, sometimes within about 10 days. Skin darkened from tissue death, one reason the pandemic became known as the Black Death. Doctors were powerless. Medicine in medieval Europe had no understanding of bacteria. Some blamed poisoned air. Others believed it was divine punishment. Nothing worked. As bodies began to pile up, society itself started to fracture. Soon there were too many dead to bury. Mass graves became common. In some regions, populations were cut in half. Florence lost roughly half of its 90,000 residents, while cities like Siena saw about 2/3 perish. Across Europe, roughly 25 million people died, and population levels would not recover until the 16th century. Entire villages disappeared, fields went unharvested, animals roamed unattended. Civilization slowed, then staggered, then, in places, stopped. But death was only the beginning. Fear would prove even more destructive. When humans face invisible death, reason often collapses first. Communities searched desperately for someone to blame. Rumors spread faster than the disease. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Many fled cities, unknowingly carrying the plague with them. The catastrophe transformed religious, political, and cultural structures across Europe. Faith was shaken, authority weakened. Nothing felt permanent anymore. Yet the most shocking truth was still emerging: just how many people were dying. The Black Death may have reduced the global population dramatically, with Europe alone losing 30 to 50% of its people. Some analyses place the death toll between 75 and 200 million worldwide. To medieval observers, it felt like the end of humanity itself. And yet, the plague did not remain confined to Europe. Historical records show major outbreaks across Western Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. Death had gone global. So why did this pandemic become so lethal compared to anything before it? Trade networks connected the medieval world more tightly than ever before. Ships carried goods, and rats, and fleas. Some researchers now believe environmental disruptions, possibly even volcanic activity, may have triggered crop failures that increased trade with the Black Sea, inadvertently spreading infected fleas into Europe. The world had unknowingly built the perfect system for a pandemic. Globalization, centuries before the modern era. But what happened after the dying finally slowed may be the strangest chapter of all. When the plague receded, Europe was not the same. With so many workers gone, labor suddenly became valuable. Wages rose. Feudal systems began to weaken. Some historians see the pandemic as a turning point in European economic development. It helped reshape the path toward the modern world. The irony is staggering. Out of unimaginable catastrophe came transformation. Plague returned repeatedly for centuries. Outbreaks continued every decade or so, including the Great Plague of London in the 1660s. The pathogen had embedded itself into human history, and in some parts of the world, it still exists today. Plague remains endemic in regions such as Madagascar and Peru. The Black Death was not just an event, it was a warning. The Black Death was not merely a disease. It was a moment when humanity discovered how fragile civilization truly is. No army could stop it. No king could command it. No prayer could slow it. Within a few short years, the world was rewritten. And perhaps the most unsettling realization is this: the forces that allowed the plague to spread, trade, connection, movement, are the same forces that define our world today. History does not repeat itself, but it often whispers warnings.